How's everybody doing today? Welcome into King of the Hill Sports on the Wire for week number 5. We are about to get into bye weeks. I'm going to tell you who's on the wire, who can you pick up, who's safe to drop, and first and foremost, let's take a look at how things went in week number 4. Week number 4 went great. The Ravens won. Rutgers football won 4-0 for the first time since 2012, beat Washington. They were in the national championship last year. Will be ranked soon. Gotta beat Nebraska first. Fantasy football wise, I went 2-1 on the week. I'm in first place in 2 of my leagues. I'm undefeated 4-0-1. I led the league in points for the second straight week. I'm 3-1 in the other, where I also led the league in points for the second straight week. In the third one, my main league that I'm the commissioner of, I'm now 2-2. I'm kind of sitting in the middle. I played the guy who had the most points this week, so there's not much I could have done. I had a little bit of a down week anyway. Shout out to Kyle Pitts getting 0. But things are looking up. The leagues are okay. We're in great shape. Now, let's use on the wire in week number 5. There's some injuries. There's some pretty good players to add this week, I could say. Let's just jump right into it. Let's get started with the quarterbacks. There's honestly not much to see here. We know who all the good quarterbacks are at this point, but if there's one guy you're going to add, make it Joe Flacco. Anthony Richardson got hurt again already. Joe Flacco coming in. He's about to win Comeback Player of the Year for the second year in a row. 16 for 26 with 170 and 2 touchdowns. 2 carries for 3 yards. Man, this guy is young and spry and ready to lead the Colts to a championship. And I mean, honestly, if Joe Flacco is a starter over Anthony Richardson, that really bodes well for Michael Pittman Jr. owners. All right, now running back. Here's where things start to get a little interesting. As you can see, there's one guy right at the top here. Kareem Hunt. I wasn't a believer when they added him. I thought it was just going to be a bait, kind of like when the Bills signed Leonard Fournette last year. But Kareem Hunt looks like he's going to be the real deal and the top running back for the Kansas City Chiefs for the foreseeable future. 14 carries for 70 yards, 2 catches. Kareem Hunt looked like the real deal. He had a 45% snap share. Carson Steele's by the wayside. I think another bad fumble. Carson Steele's like 2 fumbles in 3 games now. I think it's going to be Kareem Hunt number 1. Samaje Perine's going to be right behind him. And sorry to everybody who blew a waiver wire ad and spent a lot of their fab budget on Carson Steele a couple weeks ago. He's out. Now, another guy the projections really haven't caught up to yet is Trey Sermon. Now it's looking like Jonathan Taylor is going to be out, and Trey Sermon is the next man up for the Colts. Now, 5 carries for 8 yards doesn't look great. Now, he did have a 26% snap share last week. Now, of course, that was with Jonathan Taylor leaving the game for the most part. A lot of his carries came after that. Now, on the season, though, Trey Sermon does already have 25% of the Colts' red zone rushes. Now you see he did score a touchdown last week before Jonathan Taylor even went down this week. So they like to use him in the red zone a little bit already, even with Jonathan Taylor in there. So Trey Sermon could be a guy to add, especially once the projections catch up. You might want to try and pick him up now before that happens, because Jonathan Taylor has a high ankle sprain and odds are he's going to miss a few weeks. Just like with what happened with Joe Mixon, where everybody thought he was going to play, and then he ended up missing like 3 weeks, basically. So add Trey Sermon. Now, a few other guys to add who are already owned in my league. Roschon Johnson, 37% snap share this week. Of course, this week was the big DeAndre Swift game that everyone's been waiting for, maybe. Well, Roschon Johnson still got his. Roschon Johnson's like a third down back, I guess. He's literally getting a third of the carries. They both look good this week. Roschon got a touchdown this week. Roschon's also getting about a third of their red zone carries. Add Roschon Johnson if you haven't already. He's been added in my league. And 2 other guys that need to be added in your leagues if they aren't already. Tank Bigsby. He was healthy in week 1. He was healthy last week. Weeks 2 and 3, he wasn't really in the game at all. He had over a 25% snap share in each of the weeks he was healthy, and he looked very good in both of those games. Pretty sure Travis Etienne also picked up a little injury himself, so that 25% could jump up a little bit, especially if Etienne has a minor nick headed into next week. And Emmanuel Wilson actually played 40% of the snaps for Green Bay this week with a healthy Josh Jacobs. They don't want Josh Jacobs to run the ball 100% of the time. Apparently, they don't want Josh Jacobs to run the ball 80 or 70% of the time. It was a 60-40 split between Josh Jacobs and Emmanuel Wilson. That's a big enough snap share where Emmanuel Wilson should be owned in your league and most other leagues at this point. He's getting enough looks to be a worthy add. Now, wide receivers, where things start to get interesting this week. First and foremost, you need to add Dontavian Wicks. Dontavian Wicks is going to be the first guy off the board in all leagues this week. 13 targets. Only 5 catches, though, out of those 13 targets, but for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. Christian Watson is hurt. And not only that, but Dontavian Wicks leads Green Bay wide receivers with 4 red zone targets this year, and he caught 3 of those 4 red zone targets for touchdowns. Now, he actually shares that distinction with Tucker Kraft, who also has 4 red zone targets this year, but we will get into that in the tight end section. Now, next up, he's already owned in my league. He probably is already owned in yours. He should have been drafted, and I wouldn't have dropped him, but Xavier Legette, 87% snap share this week, 10 targets. He had a huge game. With Adam Thielen out, Xavier Legette is a solid number 2 behind Deontay Johnson, who's a clear number 1 at this point. Xavier Legette, honestly, is like a flex wide receiver 3 going forward. You need to add Xavier Legette, just like Dontavian Wicks. Those should be the top 2 guys off the board this week if they're available in your leagues. And now, next up, we're looking at these 2 Rams wide receivers here. Both of them had over a 90% snap share this week. They're looking like the top 2 receivers for the Rams until Cooper Kupp comes back, which could be in the next couple of weeks. But Jordan Whittington led the team in targets this week. He had 8 targets. He had 6 catches for 62 yards. Whittington had his first come-out game of the year. Meanwhile, Tutu Atwell, who I've preached like the last 2 videos in a row also, 6 targets, 4 catches for 82 yards. He has back-to-back games of over 80 yards at least. Tutu Atwell and Jordan Whittington seem to be Matt Stafford's top 2 options until his real top 2 options return from injury. And finally, the Chiefs. As we know, Rashee Rice is gone. Rashee Rice is going to be out for the year. Who's left at wide receiver? Xavier Worthy, obviously. Xavier Worthy is going to be added in your league, but who comes next? Justin Watson. Justin Watson had 3 targets and 2 catches for 27 yards. Now, that was the most targets among all the wide receivers after Xavier Worthy this week. I mean, who's after that? I'm pretty sure Juju Smith-Schuster played over 50% of the snaps, 0 targets. I mean, Juju could be worth an ad. Justin Watson could be worth an ad. Sky Moore had 2 targets. He didn't catch either of them this week. Now, a sneaky one to look at, Mecole Hardman. Mecole Hardman kind of has a rapport with Patrick Mahomes from the past. He's getting a little old now, but he's still a little quick. Mecole Hardman could be getting some more looks moving forward. Honestly, it's kind of a toss-up, any of these Chiefs wide receivers at this point. You know Patrick Mahomes is just going to want to spread it around anyway, so we'll see what happens, I guess. But if anything, Justin Watson is probably the one to add at the moment. And while we're on that note, let's take a look at tight ends. Noah Gray, another guy worth adding in KC. This week he had 4 targets and 4 catches for 40 yards. Now that's more targets than any of his other wide receivers had behind Xavier Worthy. So they could start running a lot of 2 tight end sets with Travis Kelce, with Noah Gray. I mean, Travis Kelce had his first good game of the year this year too. He kind of has to. He's really all that they have as far as weapons go in Kansas City right now, unless they trade for somebody, which is something else to keep an eye out for. And then these 2 guys at the top, 2 guys I've talked about in the past as well, just because they play a massive snap share. They're both on the field for like 90% of the games. Tucker Kraft, finally coming out, 9 targets, 6 catches for 53 yards and a touchdown. Like I mentioned earlier, alongside Dontavian Wicks, they both have 4 red zone targets each, which is tied for the team lead in red zone targets. The top 2 red zone targets on Green Bay are still sitting out there on your waiver wire. If there's going to be any touchdowns going around, these are the top 2 guys who are going to be getting them. Tucker Kraft, massive snap share. Not a lot of volume, but it's opportunity, and that's what I've talked about in the past too. You want that opportunity. If he's out on the field that much, odds are he's going to start catching footballs, which is exactly what I said last week with K. Dotton, who had 7 catches for 47 yards. Well, he had even more targets this week. Now, of course, McMillan is out for Tampa at the moment, but even then, that shouldn't affect Cade Otton all that much. 6 catches for 52 yards this week, 7 for 47 last week, 8+ targets in back-to-back weeks. Cade Otton's still tight end 21, even with that. Tight end is a mess, as we know. Anyway, it's a tight end carousel, goes round and round. Another guy I've preached for a few weeks now, Eric All Jr., 4 for 4. He has 12 targets through the last 3 weeks, and he caught all 12 of them. Mike Gesicki had 1 catch for negative yards this week, I think. Mike Gesicki had 1 catch this week, and it was for negative 9 yards. 0.1 point in full point PPR. Eric All, he's the steady contributor here. His snap shares stand. Eric All is a steady contributor here. Honestly, I almost want him more than Gesicki at this point. 7.67 basically for fantasy points. At tight end, that's actually like significant. That's significant at tight end this year. I feel like you want somebody steady and not 0 points from Kyle Pitts. Honestly, he has more catches than Kyle Pitts has this year through only 3 games. Eric All, worth an ad, the Iowa product. That's who's on the wire, headed into week number 5. We're going to end with a final look at my team in my main league here. That is 2-2. Hopefully we have better luck this week. Bye weeks are starting. I need a new kicker. This Lions kicker is looking a little sus anyway. But anyway, that's who's on the wire. And we are on the way to week 5 on Matt Mods. This is King of the Hill Sports. Good luck to you in your fantasy leagues. And we are signing out.